Take a look at the two people I have on screen. Solely based on the way that they look in their picture, which one of them looks more dangerous? Raise your hand if it's the man on the right. Raise your hand if it's the woman on the left. Or on the, wait, sorry. Raise your hand if it's the man on the left. Okay, thank you. Raise your hand if it's the woman on the right. Sorry, my directions. For those of you that raised your hand for the woman on the right, you are correct. This is Nanny Doss, and although she may look harmless, she actually murdered at least 8 people confirmed, 3 more possible. She used arsenic to poison 4 husbands, her mother, her grandson, her sister, and one of her mothers-in-law. This man, Glenn Ford, was sentenced to death in Louisiana by an all-white jury. He was actually innocent of the murder and robbery for which he was charged, but he spent 30 years in prison waiting for someone to realize that his defense counsel was incompetent and the prosecution was unjust. The problem here is that most of you raised your hand when I asked if you thought Glenn Ford was more dangerous than Nanny Doss. Society is raised on the idea that men are inherently more dangerous than women. As children, we are taught to watch out for big, scary men, but we aren't told to watch out for strange women. In fact, Parents.com, a website magazine for parents, has an article advising parents to teach their children that if they get lost, they should find a mom. Today, I hope to show you all that this is terrible advice, because women can be much more dangerous than society leads us to believe. In fact, society's belief that men are more dangerous than women can cause those women that are dangerous to be taken less seriously than they should be. Nanny Doss is commonly referred to as the giggling granny, a nickname that severely understates the severity of her crimes. Nanny Doss is not the only woman that was taken less seriously by the media, however. Before I get into the stories of multiple murderesses for whom this was the case, I would like to prove my earlier claim. I earlier said that society is brought up on the idea that men are inherently more dangerous than women. To see if this is actually true, I conducted interviews around my community. I interviewed 10 adults and 10 seniors in high school, asking them each to tell me about a time when they helped a stranger and a time when they felt unsafe or uncomfortable around a stranger. With their responses, I paid special attention to the genders of the people they told me about. I also chose to ask them to tell me stories instead of asking questions so that I could better gauge the emotional connections my interviewees had to the stories they were telling me. To eliminate bias, I also chose not to tell them what my project was about until after they had answered. So first, let's analyze what I learned about the strangers my interviewees helped. 9 out of the 20 people I interviewed, 45%, did not specify the gender of the person they helped, or they relayed helping multiple people. 20% of the people told me about a time in which they helped a woman, and 35% of the interviewees told me about a time when they helped a man. As you can see, almost half of the people I interviewed did not specify a gender or told me about a time when they helped multiple people. This, paired with the comparable numbers of people that actually specified whether they helped a woman or a man, shows that society also raises people to help those in need, no matter who they are or what they look like. When I asked people to tell me about a time in which a stranger made them feel unsafe, 70% of my interviewees, 9 out of 10 of the adults that I interviewed, told me about a time when a man or multiple men made them feel unsafe. The 15% of the people that told me they feel comfortable around pretty much everyone were 3 of my seniors that I interviewed. They most likely have not had as many experiences that have caused them to be scared in that way yet, which is a good thing. 10% of the interviewees, 2 people, told me about a time when multiple people, both genders in the groups, made them feel uneasy. But only 1 person out of the 20 people I interviewed told me about a time when a woman made them feel unsafe. This interviewee was working at a drive-thru at a fast food restaurant. They said that a woman and her friend were being extremely rude, and the interviewee suspected that the women were under the influence of an illicit substance. The interviewee also thought they had seen a gun in the car. Women are not harmless creatures, and they should not be treated as such. Here are some examples of murderous women that were treated differently because of their gender. Mary Rodgers was a 19-year-old who killed her husband in Vermont in 1902. At her trial, she was sentenced to death. But as her execution drew nearer, there was a cross-country media campaign to spare her life. The Americans in the early 1900s were terrified of the implications of hanging a woman. This is because of the stigma that women are more caring and incapable of causing harm that would deserve such harsh punishment. And despite everyone's efforts through the media, Mary Rodgers was the second and last woman to be hanged in Vermont. Public outcries like the ones for Mary Rodgers did not, and still do not happen for men, but they did happen for women later on. Nellie Madison shot her husband Eric 5 times while he was asleep in California in 1934. Because of her detached manner and refusal to talk during her trial, she was dubbed the Enigma Woman by the media. The media also revealed that in her past, Nellie Madison had somewhat reckless behavior, including horseback riding and handling guns. This was considered unladylike for the time period, so to make an example of her, the prosecutors of her case sought the death penalty. They didn't like that she didn't act like the typical women of that time period. As the date of her death sentence approached, there was another public outcry, but this time it was successful. Nellie Madison was granted a reprieve. Madison escaped her death because the Californians were afraid of the implications of hanging a woman, just as the American public was in the case of Mary Rodgers 22 years before. More recently, Andrea Yates drowned her 5 children in 2001. After she had killed them, Andrea Yates calmly called her husband and said that she had done it, without specifying what it was. Her husband rushed home to find his dead children, and Andrea Yates was arrested. She was sentenced to life in prison after her first trial, in which she had entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. After her second trial, however, she was acquitted because it was discovered that a psychiatrist had testified incorrectly in her first trial. Andrea Yates killed her children because of her postpartum psychosis and schizophrenia. She claimed that she did not have the motherly instincts. This is one of the most horrific crimes anyone could imagine: a mother murdering her children. It is difficult to wrap our minds around the idea that a woman can kill the people she is supposed to love and protect more than anyone in the world. So when Andrea Yates did just that, the public grabbed onto the idea of her mental illness. It is a reasonable explanation for an extremely unreasonable act. It is exactly what the public needed to help explain her actions without admitting that every woman has the capacity to cause that much harm. After reading about the different treatments of women in the media because of society's established stigmas, I decided to interview someone from the Houston Police Department to see if there was any difference between the behaviors and treatment of female and male suspects. Detective Shorten has worked with the Houston Police Department for 30 years, and in her responses to my questions, she mentioned Andrea Yates' case a few times. When asked about the treatment of female suspects in comparison to male suspects, Detective Shorten mentioned the fact that Andrea Yates raised an outcry about mental illness and not having a motherly instinct. In fact, Detective Shorten mentioned in this answer that it is human nature to be more sympathetic to women. So even though police officers try not to treat female suspects differently, it is impossible not to think about them differently subconsciously. This further proves my point that the dangers posed by women are overlooked and rationalized because of what society conditions us to believe from our childhoods. I know that this presentation may have been a little frightening, but it is important to note that many women are not dangerous. They are loving and caring and incredibly kind, just like my mom. I don't want you to be afraid of every single woman you know. That is not the goal of this talk. What I do want is for you to be more cautious. I want you to teach your children to be more cautious. It is time for everyone to be treated equally, no matter their gender. Women should be treated as equals to men, with the good and the bad. And until society changes this belief that men are scary and dangerous while all women are harmless, nobody will truly be safe from the dangerous people around them. Thank you.